This question is horrible, and there's a good example of why when you get to the hard reading module, you have to jump around the passages. You can't just do them in order. You're going to have to pick things that are really easy and do those first. And then if you run out of time on something like this, who cares? You're probably not going to get it right anyway because it's insane. So I will help you get it right, but this is not a high priority question. So we can probably tell that right away just by reading this paragraph and even just looking at the answer choices. Like, look at how long they are. That's not a good sign this is going to be easy. The paragraph also has a lot of craziness going on. So let's look at this. The population of the coral Lophelia pertussa declined significantly around 9,000 years ago in the Alboran Sea and around 11,000 years ago near the Mauritanian coast. Using the ratio of manganese to calcium, which inversely correlates, that's going to be important, with ocean oxygenation levels, marine scientist Rodrigo de Costa, Portillo Ramos, and colleagues evaluated whether oxygenation played a role in the declines of L. pertussa. The researchers concluded that oxygenation may have been important in the Alboran Sea, but not near the Mauritanian coast since. Okay, may have been important in the Alboran Sea, but not near the Mauritanian coast. So if I go back to the 9,000, 11,000 thing, right? So 9 and 11 are here and here, right? So Alboran, something's going on at 9, and in the Mauritanian coast, nothing's going on at 11, right? So just very dumbly, it seems like, yeah, since why would it be important in the Alboran Sea? Like, since something happened in Alboran and nothing happened in Mauritania, right? That's basically what I'm looking for in these choices, right? That's the reason why they think it's important in one place, not the other. The line is very different at 9,000 years on the Alboran Sea and pretty much the same in the Mauritanian coast. Let's see what that dumb version does for us. Let's look at A. So this is because a substantial increase in oxygenation in the Alboran Sea corresponded with the local decline in L. pertussa, but the opposite relationship between oxygenation and L. pertussa was found near the Mauritanian coast. Well, like we said, nothing happened in Mauritania. So what do you mean opposite relationship? There's no relationship. Nothing happened. So we should get rid of this. Now, we do have to realize, if we want to dive deeper, that they're talking about oxygenation, but that is nowhere on this graph, right? Look, ratio of manganese to calcium in samples from Alboran Sea and Mauritanian coast. Look at the graph, manganese to calcium ratio. Oxygenation is not on here. So in terms of ups and downs, I'm not really paying attention to the increases and decreases quite yet. I'm literally just saying that they're telling me something happened in Mauritania. The graph says nothing happened in Mauritania. So choice A is wrong. It's not about oxygenation, but there's a relationship. We can go back to the passage in a second for it, but let's just focus on one thing at a time. B. L. pertussa declined in the Alboran Sea during a period of substantial local decline in oxygenation, but L. pertussa declined near the Mauritanian coast during a period of little local change in oxygenation. Well, my dumb summary seems to match there, right? There's little change in Mauritania. There's something going on in Alboran. So let's keep it. C. Oxygenation in the Alboran Sea was higher before the decline in L. pertussa than after the decline, whereas oxygenation near the Mauritanian coast was relatively low both before and after the decline. Well, again, this seems like this thing goes from high to low, and then this thing says, it's kind of low the whole time. So again, something happens in Alboran, nothing happens in Mauritania. This choice also just seems to meet that minimum dumb summary. Let's look at D. Oxygenation in the Alboran Sea tended to be substantially higher than oxygenation near the Mauritanian coast during the period studied. Okay, well, I don't really know. It seems like it jumps down here, substantially higher. I don't really know here. It doesn't seem to be saying what I needed to say, right? Like, I don't necessarily want to say one is higher than the other. I want to compare, not Alboran to Mauritania necessarily, but how the change in an Alboran matches with the change in the Mauritania, right? So I don't really care if one's higher or lower than the other. I care in Mauritania, is it higher or lower after this point of 11,000 years? Is there a shift? So to me, this just isn't hitting my dumb summary, right? I'm not going to think about it much more than that. It doesn't seem to be saying that nothing happened in Mauritania. So get rid of it. Now we need to dive a little bit deeper, and this is where it gets really sneaky and where we need this other piece, that there's an inverse correlation between the ratio that's on the graph and the oxygenation level. So what does that mean? That means when how can I even say this? It means that when the lines are high for the manganese to calcium, that is low oxygen, right? So it's inverse. So a high value up here is going to be low oxygen, and a high oxygen is going to be down here. It's kind of like the reverse, because inverse relationship, inverse means opposite. So as one thing goes up, the other thing goes down. So basically, let's just focus on this point for a second. That point seems to have a very high ratio of this manganese to calcium. But what the passage is saying is that means there's very low oxygen at that point. It's the highest point on the graph, but all the choices are talking about oxygen. So it's almost like we have to read the graph backwards. And now you see why this question is not really worth your time. We got to read it backwards. On top of that, it's actually here is the present and here is the past. So the x-axis is also all messed up too because of how we think about time going, from the right. But whatever. Let's just go look at the choices and see what we can do. So again, looking at B, El pertussis declined in the Alboran Sea during a period of substantial local decline in oxygenation. So that means we're going from this point here to this point here, which looks like we're going up. But remember, if we go to the oxygen side of things, that's actually going down, right? Because we're going from a point of high to a point of low. So that does seem good. It is a decline in oxygenization. So can't even say the words. And why am I going from right to left? Because that's the past to the present, right? That's 10,000 years ago to 8,000 years ago. And that's how time works, is we want to pass the 9,000 in the direction of getting closer to the present. So it's also messy. But honestly, that's not the biggest issue with these choices. I mean, let's look at the other part of B first. El pertussis declined near the Mauritanian coast during a period of little local change in oxygenation. Well, luckily, that doesn't even get to whether the oxygen's high or low. So just by that, we've got this down. Most of you probably still would have accepted this piece of choice B, even if you read the graph wrong. Even if you read it from left to right instead of right to left, you probably still would have been like, yeah, it looks like it's going down. So that part is probably checked off even if you're making a mistake. It's choice C where we're going to need to think about this inverse relationship correctly to cross it out confidently. Oxygenation in the Alboran Sea was higher before the decline in El pertussis than after the decline. We just said that, right? Because that's this bottom point here and this top point here. Yes, because when it was at the low point on the graph, that is high oxygenation. So that seems good. Yes, let's just check. Whereas oxygenation near the Mauritanian coast was relatively low both before and after. No, right? I'm going to even change color. Low before and after. That means that we're looking right here. But look, we said that that's the high oxygenation because it's an inverse relationship, right? The bottom of the graph actually means high oxygenation because that's the relationship. So this part right here is wrong. And that is how we technically prove choice B. However, if this was a real test, I don't know what I would have done. I probably would have been very worried about time. And so this might have been the last question that I would do. My guess is I would have gotten close. I would have probably gotten to B and C, and then I would have been very confused by the graph and probably picked B, but I wouldn't have been sure. It would have been a mark for review. Let's see if we get it right, but look at it later no matter what kind of situation. So if you did struggle with this question, if you still struggle with the explanation, don't worry about it. You're allowed to get stuff like this wrong if you're getting everything else right. So that's why the pacing strategy for reading is to pick the stuff you are more likely to get right and do that and do it really well. Lock up points there. You don't need an 800. 770 is fine. You can just focus on the stuff that's easier and throw something like this overboard and you will still get an excellent score.